Yo, what's up, guys? We are back. We're here with our first Tuesday night pre-waiver wire stream. Pretty excited about that. We're going to touch base on a few things. We're going to talk about the injuries that have happened. We've got the Mostert and the Jeudy injuries. Talk a little bit about the rookie wide receiver production, and we might spend a minute or a few minutes at the end just talking about or following up on our zero tight end draft strategy. I think that there's maybe some information that might help you with that strategy if it's new to you or you're feeling a little uneasy. But I mean, I think the obvious stuff is to start with the injuries. It looks like we had the Mostert and the Jeudy injuries. Where do you want to start with that, Josh?
Uh, let's start with Mostert because I feel like that's the one where everybody's kind of scratching their head because you've also got like the Trey Sermon situation tied to that too. So Mostert gets hurt first game. Go figure. We're super shocked about that, by the way. Didn't see that one coming at some point this season.
For the season
And what's
again.
that?
For the season
Oh,
again.
right. Right. First it was, well, that might be a month or 6 weeks. And then it was, it's going to be an 8 week deal. And then Mostert comes out on his own social media. I think it was like Twitter. He's like, actually, I'm done for the year. oh, all right, man. Thanks. So, I mean, Elijah Moore, Trey Sermon isn't active. I imagine everybody knows that at this point. And Elijah Moore kind of makes most of his opportunities. I want to say he had 19 touches, had a little over 100 yards, scored a touchdown. He made most of that on one carry. And it was a pretty big hole that was there. So I can't really say that I know much about him as a player, but we can get to that in a minute. So yeah, the Mostert injury is obviously huge, and there's some implications there because of it. Do you have anything to add to that, or you want to move on to the Jerry Jeudy?
The well, I mean, there's a couple options that you might be looking at to fill that hole. Like Trey Sermon's been drafted. I think you touched on that. You've got Mitchell that had put up some numbers, and then I thought it was kind of weird that they signed Carrion Johnson. This could be a newer theme developing, but I like to think that when teams, or at least it's traditionally been that if teams are signing somebody that has a name or had some form of success in the league, that their intent would be to use them at some point. But it's happening so often now in situations where there's not a clear path to touches that maybe that's changing. Maybe we're witnessing an evolution in today's league or the way that teams manage some of this. I did think that Carrion Johnson was appropriately cut from the Lions, and then when he was signed by the Eagles, there was a little stretch where it looked like he might still have a little bit left. So that for me is like back burner, like deep in your back pocket kind of thing. But I think I'm still paying attention if that happens. The problem is they've still got like two guys that got quite a few touches last year too. Like there's still just a lot going on with their running back room.
I mean, the San Fran running back, that whole situation it's kind of feeling like the Patriots backfield of old, is it not? Like this is a problem every year at this point. Trying to figure out like who these guys are going to be and what roles they're going to have, and we're just wrong so much with them. It almost becomes more frustrating than people even like to admit. Um,
Yeah, it's like
but
the
we
someone should have enough success to where it's worth investing some amount. That's kind of up to you to decide what it is you want to invest to try to get the guy from that backfield because there is value there. That's what they want to do, but it's like
no doubt,
it's like total dart throw.
yeah. Yeah, so maybe we just kind of, because we've already kind of talked a lot about it, so maybe we just go ahead and talk about Elijah Moore and that, and then we can just kind of cover the running backs, and then maybe we can just jump to wide receivers after that and talk about Judy's injury some more.
Okay.
But so Elijah Moore, like I said, we both watched the game, and Elijah
Talking
Moore's got
San
speed. What's that?
You're talking San Fran still?
San Fran in the Lions game, yeah,
Okay.
yep. We watched that game, and you've got Elijah Moore, like I said, 19 carries, a little over 100 yards. Most of that was made on one big play, and he did show good speed on there. The safety came down. He was the last guy to be able to make a play on him, and the angle he took showed that he was caught off guard by Elijah Moore's speed. The reports now coming out of San Fran, which we didn't hear anything about until after this, was that Mitchell, they feel like he can do a lot of the same things and looks the same way to them that Mostert did. So the problem here is I'm tired of buying into what Kyle Shanahan says, because I just feel like he says one thing and then does another most of the time. So for me, Elijah Moore is obviously worth picking up. He's maybe the first or second waiver claim for me, and just my personal opinion, and we can get to yours, Dub, about him. But he showed enough, and that offense has shown enough success running the ball, whoever's back there, that I think he is worth adding. And I think he should be one of your top priorities. If you have Trey Sermon, don't drop him just because of that 1 week inactive. I imagine he will be active now, and we have no idea really why he was at the end of the day. Like, we don't know what that's going to look like next week. And the way I'm viewing it is, if you can get a piece of that backfield, do it. And then let's just see how the rest of it plays out, because someone's going to succeed, if not a couple of guys there. So he would be my number one guy.
The Trey Sermon thing, it's all could be another part of that evolution I was talking about, where there are some trends that start somewhere, right? And we've seen the Rams do it the last probably 2 to 3 years, and other teams do it here and there, where they'll do a healthy scratch, or they'll have a guy that doesn't dress, that they still feel pretty good about, but maybe his skill set more aligns with someone else that is also dressing. Coaches seem to be putting a higher priority on
Sure.
special teams play too. So if they have 4 running backs that they like, but none of them are good on special teams, then you're gonna healthy scratch one of two guys that maybe profile as the same player. So I don't
Right.
know who. I mean, I think maybe Sermon and Hasty could be those two guys. If I had to just throw something out there, I guess it's like maybe they were looking at these two guys and they're like, well, Hasty's got some experience. He's a veteran. We're not going to get something out of, special teams from either one of them. And we can't have, 4 running backs dressed this week if you're looking at all the guys they have. So, but to bring it back to the Rams thing, they've done it before too. There have been guys that they don't dress because they profile the same, and then as soon as that other guy gets hurt, it's like we're plugging this guy in, and he's our guy, and he's going to pick up right where the other guy left off. So, I don't think Sermon and Mostert are the same guy. I think that was maybe related to somebody else, but I don't think it means that the Niners are down on Sermon. I don't think he's just going to be a guy
Right.
that's not playing.
That's very possible. That's definitely very possible. I mean, they took this guy in the 3rd round. They traded up to get him. He had obviously a great college pedigree, played at Ohio State, performed very well in big time games. So like you would just and then he had all these positive reports come out of camp about him. Throughout camp, he was the clear number 2. Like it was him and it was Mostert. That's why it was just this thing was so shocking and kind of weird. But to your point, maybe it was just a particular game plan situation. He's going to be active next week, right? I mean, I think that
Yeah.
much we can probably assume.
Well, and
So
could contrast Mitchell pretty well too. Like if they're saying that Mitchell's skill set reflects
it
or
may.
mirrors Mostert, then those guys could complement each other pretty well.
They very well may. One thing's for sure. Well, we think one thing is for sure. They won't completely commit to one guy. I don't think
yeah.
that. They never have. It's always 2 guys. So
We don't know who the guy
expecting
is
that.
because nobody knows who the guy is.
No, we're just taking the one that just showed he can, and then we're taking the guy that we think has a skill set to do it, and then we're just hoping. That's really where it's at.
Yeah. No, that's the fact. So yeah, try to invest in a piece of that backfield because somebody, maybe even a couple guys, will be worth it. We're just gonna have to play the wait and see game, kind of see what's going on, and that's just how that's gonna have to go. And then we had the Jeudy injury, and that could impact a few guys, I think, maybe indirectly, but um, how do you see the Jerry Jeudy injury impacting the Broncos offense?
So, I mean, first I just want to mention that that's super unfortunate for Jerry Jeudy because he actually looked like he was about to ball out, and he looked pretty sharp in that game. And but as far as moving forward, fantasy implications, I think there's 2 wide receivers, KJ Hamler and also Tim Patrick. It's already been reported that those are going to be the guys in 3 wide receiver sets. I don't know if we know really who's technically the number 2, but I also don't really think that really matters. Both these guys are going to be on the field a lot. I think both are worth picking up. KJ Hamler he's going to be the more exciting big play guy. He in that game, he did make a fantastic catch over the middle of the field where he jumped up in front of a couple other defenders and went up and grabbed the ball. It was a really nice play. At the same time, he also had a bomb that Teddy Bridgewater threw to him, which you don't see many of those. Teddy Bridgewater threw a bomb to Hamler. He was wide open for an easy walk-in touchdown and just dropped the damn ball. So there was good and bad that he showed. Tim Patrick is a bigger, a little bit slower wide receiver. He's been with Denver. He was the one that caught the touchdown for Denver in that game. So both guys are involved. For me, if you're looking for like the most upside between them, it's KJ Hamler. If you're trying to play it a little safer, Tim Patrick is probably the way you go. Obviously, just doing my best to guess that situation, just knowing what I know of the players and then what we saw in the game once Jeudy left. So for me, like I said, if I'm looking to make that big splash play, it would be Hamler. And for me personally, he'd probably be the one I'd be looking to go after. But I would think it'd be worth picking up both of these guys. In all leagues, they should be both added.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's going to be some touches to go around. I was liking the fact that Bridgewater kept 3 receivers fantasy relevant last year with the Panthers. The thing that really throws a curveball in that for me is that Fant had some success too. So that wasn't something that I had expected. I think Fant's a great player. I thought he was going to actually suffer the most from Bridgewater being their quarterback, and so far through 1 week, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Hamler was like the discount Ruggs, right, last draft or 2 drafts ago. So like there is some excitement there with the upside. It's going to be, are you hitting a home run or are you going for some consistency? I guess the reason I'm repeating that or being redundant about that is because like maybe with Fant being involved too, we're looking at who can do more with fewer touches, right? Like, because instead of just having 3 receivers like you did in Carolina, you've now got potentially 4 that are splitting the load in a tight end. So maybe I'm more inclined to go with the home run hitter, just to get more bang for my buck. But definitely worth some ads there to just see how it plays out.
Well, the truth is, I think if Hamler would have caught that deep ball for a touchdown, I don't even think this is a discussion. I think everybody's probably like, "Oh, KJ Hamler is the obvious ad," But if you didn't watch the game, or if you didn't see that play, you don't even know about it, And that play was there, and Hamler had everybody burnt. Like he's that fast. So worth definitely, both are worth adding, like you said.
For sure. We did get a comment in here, but I posted a comment back asking for some clarification. Ricky Allen popped in. I don't even know that he's still here, but said pick 2, Elijah Moore, Nelson Agalor, and Bryan Edwards. And I had asked for week 2 lineup or season long because I didn't really know what the context was. I think regardless, though, like I'm feeling like there's better options out there than Agalor or Edwards, but I'd probably be least inclined in both scenarios to roll with Bryan Edwards. What do you think?
Yeah, so like you said, I'd like to know if this is season long or just for week 2, because if it's just for week 2, I would feel like I would just by default, I would have to say Nelson Agalor. Like what we know for sure is he's on the field and he is either the first or second, or maybe it's a 1A, 1B situation with him and Jacoby Myers. He would be the one I'd feel the safest with, which I never thought I would say I feel the safest with Nelson Agalor in the same sentence. Bryan Edwards, man, Bryan Edwards, like he was that dude that if he hadn't made those plays at the very end of that game last night, we were easily going to be able to just be like, we can cut him, And then at the very end of the damn game, he goes and makes a few catches and you're like, well, damn, now I think I probably got to hold on to that guy, if you have him. Elijah Moore. Well, I tell you what, I didn't like what I saw at all from the Jets in that first week. Their offensive line got blown up. Zach Wilson didn't have much time to throw, and then he showed that he was feeling the pressure. He did throw a nice deep ball that hit Elijah Moore in the hands, I believe. I believe it hit his hands, and he dropped it, and he didn't look like he was tracking the ball very well. But I really like Elijah Moore's potential upside for season long. So week 2 lineup, if you have to play 2, I'm probably going to play Agalor and Bryan Edwards and just cross my damn fingers that Edwards is going to be more involved to start the game. But season long, I hold on to Elijah Moore for sure.
They all had some production, so it is an interesting question. I like it. I like your analysis on season long versus week to week. Bryan Edwards just scares me, is why I went the route I did. Is like he's had a lot of hype. He had a lot of hype last year. So I mean, I still don't really know how I feel about him, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing
I'm there with
about
you,
it is
man.
like Nelson Aguilar is interesting, and it's interesting because Mac Jones looked pretty good, right? Like
Did.
that's the part that really makes the whole thing interesting.
He did. He looked pretty good. I mean, we're talking about waivers. I was going to mention Aguilar as one of the guys because this is according to ESPN leagues. I don't know what it is for Yahoo and others out there, but 32% owned in Yahoo leagues. I mean, I think he's probably rosterable, right? Like after that first week, I kind of wanted confirmation that I wanted to see what Mac Jones looked like. I wanted to see what the usage was going to be like between the receivers. Was Aguilar only going to be this deep threat guy? And that wasn't even the case. Like he was using some shorter and medium route stuff, which I saw that and I was like, okay, cool. He had 7 targets. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a ton of volume. If the Patriots don't have to, they don't want to really throw that much. I think they want to control clock, run the ball. They have 2 tight ends they're going to use. But I liked what I saw at Aguilar enough that I think he's rosterable. And honestly, depending on how deep your league is, like you could probably even consider putting him in your flex starting as early as next week.
Nice. That's cool. We got a comment, got a little bit of some live interaction. I hope Ricky, you're either still here or you tune back in so you can catch that update. Anybody else, if you have questions, if you want some lineup advice, definitely post it. See what we have to say. Definitely appreciate that. We were just wrapping up the Broncos situation, right?
Yeah, I think we said what we needed to about them.
So Elijah
We
Moore
can.
coming up in the conversation is kind of a nice little lead into the next part where we were talking a little bit before we got started about what rookie receivers might mean for today's NFL or fantasy football. If we did want to limit it to that, even traditionally, rookie receivers are somebody that the veteran fantasy players, would avoid because you don't know what you're going to get out of them. It'll probably be inconsistent. But we're seeing that might not always be the case. We're actually seeing that it might be reasonable to expect some of these guys to have good
Produce from the
production for
jump.
a full season. Yeah, early
Yep.
and often.
Yeah, I mean, just dating back a few years ago, this was not at all the case. Like, it was pretty rare to have a rookie wide receiver be not even just blow up, but just be like consistent and productive for an entire season. Now, like, even if you just go back to last year, I probably can't think of them off the top of my head, but like Higgins and Justin Jefferson obviously stick out, but I know there was more. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. But there was like a Jerry Jeudy, he had some drop issues. CeeDee Lamb,
CD, yeah.
like and these guys, you look at all these guys now, like they're all guys you want on your roster, and they were productive at different times, if not for the entire year last year. Like Jeudy, obviously, or sorry, not Jeudy. Jefferson had an amazing year last year. So it just kind of started making us think differently about these rookie wide receivers coming in, and like, is this the new NFL age? Is it just with all this passing and using 3 wide receiver sets often at this point? And then even some teams like Arizona, they go 4 wide receiver sets all the time. So we saw that with some rookies in week 1. We saw DeVonta Smith have a good week. We saw Jaylen Waddle have a good week. Maybe DeVonta Smith was expected, maybe not. I don't know. I certainly had my questions. It was nice to see him have a good game and be like a primary focus of the offense at the same time. And the same goes for Jalen Waddle. Like he did only have 6 targets, but he was a focal point early for the offense. They put him in motion all the time. They're looking to get him open in different ways. And when they had a short yardage goal situation, they got him the ball, and that's the one he scored on. So it's just something. I don't know if there's really anything you can take from it because these guys are all owned outside of just maybe looking at these rookie wide receivers differently. It also doesn't hurt that these guys are super talented. You know what I mean? These guys are very good that came in last year and then some of these guys now.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think what it can do is it can maybe give you a little more confidence in guys that are young, that are maybe even a post type sleeper guy. Like we had a few guys that we were looking at the end of the draft, and some of them might still be available in your league. So like you had mentioned Waddle and DeVonta Smith. Jamarr Chase was one that had like a lot of negative attention coming into the draft. At the end or towards the end of the last stream, I had said like you probably put enough into your draft capital that you're riding this out. Like run him out there. We'll see what happens. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. He ended up with a nice game. That was good. But there's some of these other guys that are interesting, like Rondale Moore. Or I mentioned post-type sleeper because Michael Pittman. Like, these are guys that might still be available in your league that could produce, maybe without the most opportunity or the most experience, can come in and be a factor for you. And that we had a whole list of guys at the end of the draft as far as receivers go that we really liked, and a lot of them were young. A lot of these rookie receivers were going really late. So that might be an opportunity for you if you have a chance to jump on some of these unknown commodities out there, because there is still a chance to get them in your lineup before it's too late.
Yeah. There's actually a couple other rookies that I wanna mention as well, but I don't know if you want to do that right now or if you wanna
Yeah, that's fine.
you want to start going. Okay. So two other rookie wide receivers that I think we should be paying attention to. Terrace Marshall over in Carolina. I think I think some people in the fantasy community have talked about him, and he's been thrown out there, but he's still only 24% owned. And of course, you have DJ Moore, and you have Robbie Anderson, and then you've got Christian McCaffrey catching 37 balls out of the backfield. So that is kind of like an issue, you know. But Terrace Marshall is a bigger wide receiver who plays in the slot primarily, and he did have 6 targets, and it was only the first week. I think Robbie Anderson had like 1 catch this past Sunday. Like, I don't know if that's
touchdown.
going to. Yeah, it was a touchdown. I don't know if that's going to be something that we can definitively say that's how it's going to be now for the season. I mean, if there's one thing I know, it's that we can't say that. But it is worth paying attention to. If you're in a deeper league, I think Terrace Marshall should already be somebody put on the end of your bench for like that maybe, because what's going to happen is if he does blow up for a week, it's already going to be too late. Like, now you're going to be in a waiver situation where you may not get him, or you're going to have to spend a lot of fab to get him, something like that. So he's a guy that if you don't want to add him, fine, but pay attention to what he does. And then Rondale Moore with Arizona is another one. 4 catches for, I think it was like 68 yards. And, we've got Christian Kirk over there who had a big game too. I'll let you talk about him in a second. But Rondale Moore, another wide receiver that Arizona, they do want to get him involved. And there was one particular play that they threw close to the line of scrimmage with him, and then he had a few blockers in front of him, and he really got to show off his speed, and it was impressive. He looked good. I have my feelings about wide receivers not named DeAndre Hopkins there. I'm a little concerned that it's going to be inconsistent no matter who it is. But I do think somebody there is going to have a good week just about every week. It's the difficult part is predicting which one of those guys it'll be. Is it going to be Rondale Moore, or is it going to be somebody like Christian Kirk?
Yeah. Christian Kirk has been an interesting option for me in fantasy. He's somebody that I rostered last year and felt like he was a bargain, high upside guy I wanted to have on my team. I felt that way about him for a couple years. I think we've seen enough of Christian Kirk to know that he's inconsistent. He's got some ability. He had 2 or 3 really nice games last year. I think he had like two touchdown games. I think he has the ability to have some good games, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's very consistent. So the fact that Rondale Moore was involved and he didn't, it wasn't like an earth-shattering game by any means, but for week 1, for his first NFL game, it's a good sign. Kind of like you had said when we were talking about somebody else, I think it's better that he's getting that volume in those reps than not, right? Like, so
Yeah.
he had a half dozen targets. He had, 48 yards, I think it was. He's showing what I wanted to see. It looked like he was involved fairly early. Christian Kirk showed me that he's still a thing, so that's going to cap Rondale Moore for now, but I do think that Moore is the guy that ends up at the end of the season having more potential over the season long haul, but I guess we're still kind of waiting and seeing. I do think there's a lot of upside still. I think Kirk has shown he can be inconsistent. However, if Kirk is going to be a thing, he might be somebody that you might be considering too. Like you said, if these guys are going to interchange and you're looking for a dart throw, like it might be worth.
Oh,
he's
he's
worth picking him
definitely.
up.
He is. I think he's worth picking up. But yeah, the thing I kind of want to put out there is, like, if you're picking up Christian Kirk, which I don't disagree with you doing, just don't be surprised if he doesn't repeat this next week or maybe the week after, and it's Rondale Moore, or like if 45-year-old AJ Green happens to catch a touchdown. Like, I just
Gonna
worry
happen.
that there's Yeah, I know. I'm just worried that there's not going to be enough where, like, not every week all these guys are going to eat. Somebody's going to have to suffer. And Rondale Moore, to me, even in the first week, they've already shown that they want to get him involved to the point where you can't just feel super comfortable with Christian Kirk. Add him to your team. If you can afford to, don't play him next week. Let's see how this goes again. He's shown, like you said, he's shown times in the past and previous years where he's had multiple weeks where he's been solid, and then for whatever reason, totally gone, totally disappears. Like, how
For
many
what
how
it's
many years has he
worth,
been with the team now?
for sure. For what it's worth, Christian Kirk does seem to be a short streaker. So if he did it week 1, which he did, have a good game, I think his pattern has been to do it for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. So if you do end up with him and you have a hole in your lineup, I think the flyer is more likely to hit this week or next week, and then I think he fades for 2 to 3 weeks after that. It might not be a thing, but like from what I've seen from Christian Kirk's pattern, it's like he will have 2 to 3 big games in a row, and then he'll kind of disappear for 4 or 5 weeks, and then he'll hit another big one or two. I don't know why, but that seems to be a thing. So
Yeah.
I think I feel a little better about that dice roll if you're going to put him in your lineup this week, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm not counting on that long term.
Yeah.
Another.
Is there any of these other wide receivers you want to mention? While we're on wide receiver waivers, basically ads, so we might as well continue on with that.
Yeah, so I kind of forced the Michael Pittman like post type sleeper thing into the conversation, but we're also talking
I know
about
where you're going.
busy receiver cores, and I think that Van Jefferson is somebody that I'd like to bring up in that situation because it's going to be another receiver core that is busy, but it's a new look offense, and it looks like they're going to be pretty happy throwing the ball. So I'm not happy with the volume that Van Jefferson put up. The touchdown he scored was kind of fluky. The DB got lost for a second, and then nobody touched him when he went to the ground. He was actually down for a second. Nobody touched him. He got back up and ran it the rest of the way in. Props to him for his awareness. But Stafford last year, well, for the last 2 or 3 years, has also had a knack for hitting some of these guys that tend to be deep ball specialists. So there were some role players that the Lions had on their team that they would come in for 5, 6, 7 plays on offense for the entire game. But their job was to get down the field, and Stafford would take a shot. And if that is what Van Jefferson ends up being, while Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are running, the underneath and the nice clean cut routes that they're really good at, I mean, that could be an opportunity. Even for little volume, that could end up being a big opportunity. I think there's a lot going on with the Rams offense where a guy like Van Jefferson could get lost down the field once in a while. He's only rostered in 2.1% of leagues, and the dude went for 80 and a touchdown. So
you always have that. You always have that thing in your back pocket too, where like Cooper Kupp has shown, my man's gets banged up, and if he's off the field, then you have that thing in your back pocket too, where like all of a sudden Van Jefferson becomes even more interesting because maybe he gets a little bit more involved into the game plan as a whole. He was he not? He was a high draft pick for them just last year. Right.
Yeah, he was. So that's another post-hype sleeper, like didn't have a lot of opportunity. There's a new look on the offense. So kind of the same situation at least as Michael Pittman. They've got a new quarterback in town. There's more opportunity for these guys. So don't forget about that. Even if they didn't get a lot of reps or a lot of looks last year, like there's still some opportunity and these guys are still talented.
Yeah.
One piece that's missing from the Rams offense, somebody that I kept an eye on the last couple years, didn't really come to fruition in LA, but kind of might lead us into the next part, Gerald Everett. You will not run out of tight ends that are under the radar that are rumored to have a bunch of athletic ability. Gerald Everett was one of those guys. He had a game in Seattle, and that kind of gets me thinking about our zero tight end strategy. I don't know that Gerald Everett was on many radars during the draft season, but Gerald Everett is somebody that has been rumored since he came into the league to have a lot of athletic ability, and Russell Wilson can make tight ends relevant, i.e. Will Dissly, Luke Wilson. There's been a handful of them over the time that Russell Wilson's been out there, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because you mentioned Disley. That's my only pushback there. I do agree with you with the athleticism, and he did get the touchdown. Everett did in that Seattle game. But Disley played too, and Disley had a few catches too. And so I guess where I'm at with it is we've talked, you and I've talked before about these teams that use multiple tight ends at once, and then it's like, how do you figure who's like, the only time I really want to buy into the situation is when one is clearly more of the blocker, and then one is the guy that's going out and running a lot of routes. The problem I have with this is Disley and him both are out there running routes at different times, so that's like my only pushback with it. But I do agree with you that that's somebody you're going to be thinking about. I just don't think you add him yet. But to your point about the zero tight end strategy, like there was some tight ends this past week. I mean, not that he wasn't drafted, but Gronk, I think he was tight end freaking 1 on the week, and he was going super late in drafts for a tight end. And then you got guys like Jared Cook that weren't drafted, owned in 26% of leagues. And the guy went out there and had 8 targets, 5 catches for 56 yards. It's not like that's super exciting, but we're also talking about the tight end position at the same time. So,
oh, for sure.
Yeah, got Cole Kmet, like, a high drafted tight end from the Bears. Not that you're like, I don't even know if you're looking at him right now and you're super excited about it. 7 targets, 5 catches, 42 yards, and to be honest, kind of looked the part. You and I were watching that game, and you mentioned it to me. He kind of looked that part on the field. I thought he looked pretty good. I just, I don't know if that's going to pay off for you in the long run. I don't know how many touchdowns. At the end of the day, with these tight ends that are not one of the highest drafted guys, you're just really hoping for like 5 for 50, or you're hoping they get in the end zone. But to Dub's point, the thing is they're available. Like, not only are they available late in drafts, but they're still available right now on waiver wire. It's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. There's I had mentioned Jordan Akins at the end of last stream because he was another guy that's been talked about as like being athletically capable for the Houston Texans. It ended up being Pharaoh Brown. He's listed on the team site as the number 1 tight end on the depth chart. So maybe they were, they knew something before we did, but he ended up having a decent game for somebody that wasn't being talked about. And Tyrod Taylor, we did talk about how he fed Charles Clay in Buffalo and, made him fantasy relevant. So consider what I had to say about Jordan Akins, but now we're going to apply that to Pharaoh Brown. We're just going to move that over. It happens sometimes if that's going to be the guy that's on the field, if he's the one getting the looks, but the circumstance is still the same. Tyrod Taylor, I think, likes tight ends. He actually looked pretty good in week 1, so, I mean, I think there's some opportunity there. There's another guy that Tyrod Taylor was finding last week that we mentioned. We didn't know how to feel about it, but I know it's your boy.
Brandon Cooks is my boy. Listen, nobody wants to give that man any love, and all he does is show up every year. Tyrod threw a couple to him that Tyrod definitely should not have thrown. Like, they were a couple of long bombs. One of them was in double. Dude, Brandon Cooks went up in double coverage and made a play on a ball. Like, I haven't seen him do that much. It's usually just him, like, burning a guy, But, yeah, 100 and something yards. I can't remember the number. I don't have it in front of me. It's like 123 yards or something like that. He's obviously the most dangerous wide receiver, and their biggest threat they have on that team is him. I don't expect Tyrod Taylor to look as competent as he did in that game. They don't get to play Jacksonville every single week. But, here we are again, another year. Brandon Cooks slept on again, and Brandon Cooks is going to have another year of production, assuming he doesn't, end up with another one of those concussions that he's pretty good at getting to.
I really hope it doesn't happen, man.
One.
That was like it's such a sad end to a career. Like, Wes Welker's the only other one that I can really think of. But when you see a guy that produces that you just want to it's just like he never really seems to like overstep. The dude's put up 1,000-yard seasons for like 4 or 5 different teams in the NFL. He got moved around like. He's played for 3 teams in 3 years. It was like he just kept getting moved, and like it seemed like nobody wanted him, and he just kept balling out. I really hope that he stays healthy.
Now he's gonna do it with Tyrod Taylor.
Dude, go. If he does it with Tyrod Taylor, go.
I'm glad you switched back to wide receiver though for a second, because before we were talking about that tight end strategy. There's a wide receivers that kind of did something this past week that I want to bring up, and then I think we could probably move on to the running backs, like the one that most people care about. But we mentioned Deontay Harris for the Saints, wide receiver for the Saints, this past Sunday. He ended up catching a long one. He ended up catching a long bomb. from Winston. I think he only had 2 catches for 72 yards, a touchdown. Here's the thing, though. Winston only threw 20 passes, 22 passes, something like that, 14 completions, less than 150 yards. Like they just happened to be in positions where they were so like they were getting turnovers. Rodgers and that Green Bay offense, yeesh, didn't look too good.
That was the
But
worst
Winston
I've ever
just
seen
didn't. Yeah,
them look.
I know. That's a whole nother thing that we don't have to get into right now. Like, don't overreact to that if you're a Green Bay fan. Like, we'll just move on to next week. But anyway, Deontay Harris, somebody that we should keep on our radar. He is, or maybe he still is, or maybe they're changing that. I guess I should have paid more attention this past week. But their kick returner, their punt returner, the dude is absolutely amazing in open field. And just with Michael Thomas out, and now it's, we think it's Marquez Callaway, and then we really don't know who the other wide receiver is going to be. We kind of mentioned him in last Sunday's stream as a guy to look at. He caught a bomb for a touchdown. So I don't necessarily know if you even need to add him yet still. Like I said, it was 2 catches. But pay attention to him, add him to your watch list, whatever you want to do. He's owned in basically no leagues at all. And if this ends up repeating itself again next week, might be worth adding. So I just wanted to throw him out there. And then there was maybe one other guy that no one's probably really thinking about. KJ Osborne, 3rd wide receiver for Minnesota. I don't know if this is going to repeat itself either, so I'm not recommending picking him up. But Minnesota showed something interesting and different this past week. They were running a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, like a lot of it. And that's not something they normally do. And I think it kind of goes to the point that we talked about weeks ago when we were talking about the tight end, name's escaping me now, Irv Smith Jr.
Mm-hmm.
They were showing in preseason, they were running him in the slot a lot, they're tight end, and they were using him a lot. He was heavily involved. We were questioning what that offense was going to look like now that Irv Smith had gotten hurt and they weren't going to do that. How was the offense going to look? Were they going to completely get out of that, or were they going to try to stick to it and use Chris Herndon? Well, as it turns out, they decided to use KJ Osborne, one of their 3rd wide receiver. 7 for 76, and to be honest, kind of looked the part on the field. Like, that's the most important thing of all of this, is he kind of looked the part. Again, I wouldn't add him yet, because this guy could go out and have like 2 targets and not catch a ball next week, and we go, okay, forget about it. But if it repeats itself,
I just got yours.
If it repeats itself, this is something that I would pay attention to next week. And then if you see it again, maybe you can try your best to get ahead of the game and pick that guy up, because I don't think anybody's really thinking about him right now.
It's a good point. The 3rd receiver in Minnesota was intriguing to me in the offseason, but only because it was Dede Westbrook. I found it was interesting that they brought him in. So seeing that someone else is filling that role is very intriguing. I know that watching the Vikings over the last couple of years, I feel like they've wanted to see somebody take over that role. They had BC Johnson, they had Laquan Treadwell, and they gave those guys some opportunities to really see what they can do. I took it as more they just didn't really trust the player as much. So there might be some real opportunity there that we just haven't seen because they didn't want to rely on those other guys.
Well, Treadwell gave them all the reasons to not trust him. But
fair.
that is true. I didn't even think about that. Like, they did try to make him a thing for a minute, and then I think less about Minnesota and more because of Treadwell, it didn't work out.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy that is totally off the radar. We've mentioned like own rate. We're using, for what it's worth, we're using ESPN as the standard for like the roster percentage. Zach Pascal is owned in 3% of ESPN leagues right now.
Is that right? It's only 3%.
3%. So he's available for everybody. I noticed him standing out in the preseason in the slot, and I had mentioned that I thought he could have an opportunity there if he were to stay there. And then the T.Y. Hilton news came out that he was going to miss some time, and so I think it's worth monitoring. It might be worth adding at this point, but if not, definitely make sure he's on your watch list. I just think that if he stays in the slot, there's just some real opportunity there. I don't know that there's anything. It's more about what I've seen on the field. I mean, I don't know that I'm in love with Pascal the player, but he's getting looks. He's making the most of them, and that's something to keep an eye on for sure. He had a pretty good game.
Yeah, maybe it's because Pascal was already sort of on our radar. Again, like you said, it's not that we really think a lot of him as a player. But I'm surprised it's only 3% of leagues. I just feel like with those 2 touchdowns, I feel like when guys go for 2 touchdowns, somebody's picking them up.
Oh
That's
yeah,
normally how I look at it. I could be wrong, but I feel like somebody's biting on that, you know? So if you do feel strongly about a Pascal, he's probably getting picked up by somebody this week. So if you really want him, put your claim in. We've mentioned a lot of wide receivers. You know, I think there's a lot of options out there this week.
for
So
sure.
do you want to move on to these running backs where it gets a little fun?
So there was one other receiver situation, and I can just go
Okay.
through that well, two. There's two that
Yep.
I
Go
want
ahead.
to go on, so I'll just go through pretty quick. Jacksonville Jaguars receiver situation is something I've been wanting to keep an eye on. I've been functioning under the assumption that we'd be looking at Chenault getting the volume. Jones, I think, would be more like the third down bail you out kind of guy, and Shark would be the home run hitter. What I found really interesting about the stat line this week is that Shark actually led the team in targets with 12. I That is like the opposite of what I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be. Chenault had 9 and Jones had 9 too, so I think there's some volume there. Those looks weren't the greatest looks. I think we can both agree that some of those pass attempts, didn't really mean much for the receivers.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
No, yeah, there were some rough looks out there. I think Trevor
Yeah,
Lawrence
it
is a
was.
little better than that, but if Shark got 12 looks and he's the most electric player on there, he's most likely on someone else's team. But if he has a bad week or someone just doesn't really like him, sometimes that happens. Like I'm trying to make that happen, and I might be giving up a
Yeah.
little bit more than I am really comfortable with to get him on my team. I think that 12 targets for a guy that can do what he can with like 2 or 3 looks is very, very interesting to me. And then the other one I wanted to touch on, another receiver core I've been watching is the Browns. OBJ was out. That pissed me off a little bit because he was on my team, and that put me in a little bit of a bind. But with OBJ being out, DPJ and Rashard Higgins are guys that we were already kind of keeping an eye on because they both had a strong finish to last year. And I didn't think either one of them really did anything with the extra opportunity. So I'm down on those guys for now. I think I'm going to need to see more than just one good game, unless it's huge out of either one of them, before I'm interested in them at all. I think they're at this point they're pretty far off my radar.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one. I don't even have anything to add. I agree.
All right, so that does wrap up our receivers, and we're gonna get into some running backs here. What do you got for us?
Well, I mean, the obvious one we did mention earlier, but we have some more people in chat now. But Elijah Moore, we don't have to go back into it too much, but he's probably the clear number one ad right now because we just don't know what's going on with that San Fran backfield. But he showed out a little bit in last week's game. You have to add him, because all we with Mostert out for the year now, we don't know what the situation's going to look like. But let's move on to the next guy because we already talked about him earlier. Latavius Murray, he may or may not be available in people's leagues. He's 51%. If he is available, you probably have to add him, right? I mean, seems like he is, I don't know if you want to call him the number 2 or the 1B in Baltimore, but he had 10 carries and he wasn't even there for a week. He had 10 carries in their game on Monday night. I don't know what's going on with Le'Veon Bell or Devonta Freeman. They've been pretty quiet about that. But to me, I would just have to assume right now that it's Latavius Murray and it's Tyson Williams. And Latavius Murray is available in like half of leagues. So if he's out there, that would be him and Elijah Moore would probably be the top 2 running backs for me.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that was the expectation for week 1 at least because Latavius Murray had gone through like offseason prep with the Saints. So I did see a couple different places that they expected him to be most in the best game shape, which I found kind of weird because you'd think if a veteran was planning on playing for anybody this season that they should have kept themselves in better condition, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, until these other guys like Bell or Freeman are dressing, definitely those two. Even when they do, I don't know that it's going to be a big impact, but definitely feel
Yeah.
better about it if they're not in the picture, which they aren't right now. So
And they may not be. One of those guys may end up getting cut in a week or two. You really don't know. You got to think they brought both those guys on before they knew that they could get Murray on their team.
yeah,
So now that Murray's there and Tyson Williams looked pretty good, he also screwed up on a couple things. His pass blocking is questionable, and I think that might be why Latavius saw as much of the field as he did late in that game. But yeah, I think Freeman and Le'Veon, like there's a chance that one of those guys gets cut and the other guy just really never sees the field. To me, it's Murray and it's Williams until we see more.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So is there? I know you probably want to talk about him. I mean, Mark freaking Ingram, 26 carries. Like what? Dude had
Yeah.
26 carries.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Houston's running back situation is also something to keep an eye on, or that I've been wanting to keep an eye on. I didn't see it going that way. I think David Johnson ended up with a short yard touchdown to kind of save his fantasy day. I think DJ's the. I know Ingram had dibs on the first two downs, but I still just kind of had this gut feeling that DJ was going to be the dude. But this volume changes that for sure.
Yeah, big time. Like you said, like DJ had that touchdown, but he wasn't. I mean, 26 carries by Mark Ingram, and he seems like he's going to be the goal line guy. The problem here, all three running backs scored. Philip Lindsay scored two, and that was also like within the 10-yard line as well. I don't. It's not necessarily a situation you're going to be too thrilled about being involved in as a fantasy owner, but Mark Ingram isn't owned almost anywhere. And also, again, they don't get to play Jacksonville every week. 26 carries. What do you have, like 85 yards? I mean, that's tough efficiency. That's not the prettiest.
They do get to
But
play
you have
Jacksonville
to have
again.
that guy. If they play Jacksonville every week? Because if so, I'm kind of interested.
They will be playing them one more time.
Okay. Um, but you have to pick him up, right? Like he has to be. There is certainly a roster, someone's roster in every 10-team and beyond league that needs Mark Ingram on their team, right? It might not be your particular roster, but some roster should be picking him up because that volume is insane, and it won't go. It probably won't go anywhere until he breaks down in a month when he has 200 carries.
We do have a running back related question here. Bars in the tuck. Thanks for joining us, man. Says, "What's up, fellas? My waivers are use it or lose it. So without a real need, apparently we've got Zeke, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, both handcuffs, Damian Harris, Naheem Hines, and Murray on the team. We want to know if we're using our number one waiver priority on Mitchell to play keep away. Little defensive move."
Do you have to have those handcuffs? Because I don't really want to drop any of those running backs that you mentioned. But like CEH, who's your handcuff with him? Is it Darrell Williams? Because if so, I would absolutely be dropping him for Elijah Mitchell if you can get him. To me, that'd be a bit of a no-brainer, especially with those other running backs you have. I mean, if CEH went down, are you really going to play Darrell Williams over some of those other guys? Like, are you really going to play him over Damian Harris? Probably not. I think Tony Pollard makes sense to hold him if you can. But
Yeah, you've
I
been
would
big
be
on Tony
dropping.
Pollard.
Well, I think he probably is nothing with Zeke there, and Zeke hasn't. Zeke that's been one of his best traits throughout his career is how durable he is. But it's another year older, and he was actually banged up a little bit last year for the first time. And I think Pollard has showed enough that if he does get to be the only guy back there, if Zeke's out for a week or something like that, he's gonna crush it. So to me, if you can let go of whoever your cuff is for CEH, that's what I would do. And I definitely think Mitchell's worth picking up. Might not be anything, man. Like Trey Sermon's probably going to be activated next week. Good luck predicting what Kyle Shanahan thinks and what he's going to actually do. But Mitchell showed a lot of speed, and it's really just a situation. Like the 49ers backfield is, you want something from that if you can get it.
Oh, he's got Freeman, Devontae
Oh,
Freeman.
you
So
got
yeah, you
Freeman?
can dump that.
Gone.
Yep.
Gone.
See you
Freeman gone,
later.
dude. Go get Mitchell.
Yeah, totally agree with that. It looks like you've got quite the stable of running backs too. So, I mean, I'm kind of wondering what your receivers look like because it seems like there's a good opportunity, but you can also use that to your advantage because I think there's enough options that have some upside for receivers that you wouldn't have to burn your waiver claim either. Like if Mitchell's probably the priority because you're going to have to use your waiver claim to get him. And then you could probably
Yeah.
sneak in too if you need help at receiver and get maybe whatever's left behind. Sometimes that works out pretty good.
Agreed. Yeah, I'd definitely be picking him up and dropping Freeman for sure. So who we were talking about Mark Ingram. Somebody should be adding him. Like I said, might not be everybody's roster, but he should be added. Is there any of these other guys that popped to you? I got a few, but I'll let you go if you got somebody.
I've changed the way that I feel about Devontae Booker a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to just totally flip the script on that. I was really big on him. I thought he finished the year last year really well. It's like Barkley. I'm concerned for Barkley, and so in some way, in the backwards thinking, that I think that's going to be good for Booker, but I didn't think that Booker looked anywhere near the way he looked in the preseason. And I know it's hard to get a good gauge on that, but like Booker's looked good the last few regular season games I had seen him too. I'm gonna temper those flames just a little bit, okay? But I still think with the way that Barkley looked, there's some opportunity available for Booker. But I just wanted to, I guess, follow up on that a little bit. We're pumping the brakes a little bit on Devontae Booker over here.
Okay. Go back to the chat real quick. DK Higgins, Ayuk, nothing after that. That's his wide receivers. Sub, appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So
I
okay,
like those
yep.
receivers. I mean, like Ayuk, I have Ayuk in 2 of my 3 leagues right now. He scared me a little bit with that week 1 performance, but like, dude's good. Like, I'm
He
still
is.
running him out there.
He is. He would be, honestly, we haven't really, like, we haven't talked about like trade targets yet. We'll probably get to that at some point soon, but he's absolutely one of those dudes, right? Like
Yeah.
he's got to be a guy. If someone has him and they're feeling a little wishy-washy about him, I'd be trying to get him.
I mean, like, I like Deebo Samuel personally. Like, I just have that
Oh
little
yeah, me
bit of
too.
extra love for him. But
Me
like
too. I like him.
Ayuk probably, I think Ayuk's good enough that he could have tore Okuda's Achilles too. Like, I think he could have put that kind of work in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I wanna mention a couple of these guys too. For what it's worth, Tony Jones Jr. is now Latavius Murray for the Saints. Now that Murray's been cut, he's now the guy. 11 carries, 50 yards. It's not something like where you're going to be able to just pick him up and play him. It's not that type of situation. But he probably should be rostered. I mean, honestly, if I'm in a deeper league and I have Kamara, I'd be picking up Tony Jones Jr. He looks pretty good. Kind of looks the part. Like I said, I don't, in 10-team leagues, maybe you don't need him, but he should be somebody people are paying attention to. And let's see here. James White, I don't even know if he's worth mentioning, but this dude's only 53% owned. And like, that he was pretty damn involved
How many times is this gonna happen?
with it where he just won't go away.
Why are there players like this like Brandon Cooks we were talking about? James White is that guy every year.
Yeah, I know. Because it's so uninspiring, Like, do you want to play James White on your team? You don't want to, right?
I mean,
It
depends on your roster comp. Like if it's designed that way, like if you go all wide receiver, like no running back, and you got James
Yeah.
White in a PPR, like that's been interesting for years.
I mean, full PPR, you can certainly make the case. We play in half PPR. If you're in half PPR standard, it's just like it's borderline, but he should be rostered. He should be rostered. He had 6 catches, 49 yards. We mentioned it in the stream this past Sunday. Like Mac Jones has shown he's kind of Tom Brady-esque in the sense of like he's very willing to dump off short. Who does that? I mean, there's a very direct 1-to-1 there. Like when James White is on the field, Mac Jones is going to look for him, and he did 6 catches. So kind of interesting. Like I said, he's only half owned. He might not be available, but it's out there in about half leagues. See who else there was for me. It's probably it. Unfortunately, there's not, like Mitchell and Latavius Murray were the obvious ones this week, and then it gets kind of weird. But Larry Roundtree, a rookie for the Chargers. We didn't know if that was going to be Justin Jackson that was going to be the backup for the Chargers, or if it was going to be Kelly. Turns out it's Larry Roundtree. He was out there on the field quite a bit. He had 8 touches, looked pretty decent. Eckler has been hurt in the past. He's a smaller running back himself. What we definitely know too is he's not going to be the workhorse. Like he's just not that style of running back, and the Chargers don't intend to use him that way. So Roundtree should be on people's radars. Same thing for me too. If you're in a deeper league and you have Eckler, it might be worth adding him.
I do think we need to talk about Cordell Patterson, and I
Okay.
don't know.
I can't believe you were saying that already.
Dude, we are, because dude's a running back. And we saw a taste of that last year in Chicago, right? And he can fill that role. I don't know, like, it might be more valuable to talk about Cordell Patterson in terms of how it affects Mike Davis. Because Mike Davis produced last year. Mike Davis had volume last year. And Cordell Patterson had enough touches this week to affect volume. I don't know. We were kind of talking about Mark Ingram, and I feel the same way about the Falcons backfield, where it's like, how often are they going to be able to run the ball, or how long into the, how deep into the games are we going to be comfortable running the ball? And
Mhm.
Patterson was a receiver by trade when he started his career. So like for me, it might be more about like how do I feel about Mike Davis, because I was big on Mike Davis, and I think there's still an opportunity for him there to have a good fantasy season. But that's another one that like I'm just gonna temper that a little bit more than maybe I'm gonna bump him down a little bit on how I feel about Mike Davis fantasy production because of what I saw from Cordell Patterson. I didn't see that coming, so it did
Yeah.
surprise me. It changes things a little bit for me. Just something that I thought was like just worth mentioning.
Yeah, you're basically just saying like when you took Mike Davis, you were kind of anticipating like part of why you like the idea of having Mike Davis was just never coming off the field, gonna be a workhorse, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
nobody there to really threaten anything.
Oh yeah.
Cordell did have 7 carries, for what it's worth, 7 carries, 50 something yards. So like, yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate if you're a Mike Davis owner to see that, but this is the reality too with most backfields in the NFL. There's very few true workhorses, and for good reason. It's tough for guys to hold up for an entire season. To be honest, if you're a Mike Davis owner, it might not necessarily be the worst news because I mean this is all personal preference, I suppose, but I kind of like seeing my running backs. I have Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon had over 30 touches total this past week. You love it for the fantasy production, but it also makes me very nervous at the same time, because I want that guy for the whole year, and I don't want to see that every week.
Oh, for
Give
sure.
me give me 18 and I'm cool, and of course it's going to come with a little bit less fantasy production, but it's a damn headache when your running backs go down, man, and there's nobody to put there.
Well, it
So,
also probably means it's more likely that Mike Davis is there for the goal line stuff. So like I think it was
yeah,
already
and
very likely, but like Patterson is gonna probably be better used like between the 20s, middle of the field kind of stuff. So like you're still getting that touchdown upside.
you are, and at the end of the day, he still had 18 touches. He had it was somewhere between 70 and 80 yards total, I think. Like, not the most exciting day from him, but the Falcons really just struggled as a whole. I mean, what did they have, like 6 points? They just had a rough day. Hopefully that would be my biggest concern of anything if I had Mike Davis, is just how is Atlanta going to rebound? Because it's tough having running backs on bad teams. So, was there any other? As you mentioned Cordell, I'm kind of looking through this list of guys like I kind of had wrote down. Kenneth Gainwell is a little interesting, but it's not somebody I'd be adding right now. Just somebody I'd be paying attention to. We thought that was it Boston Scott, has been the running back 2 there, and then turns out nope, it's Kenneth Gainwell now, the rookie. I think he was like a 5th-round rookie. He had 9 carries, 2 receptions, just something to monitor. He looked pretty good, but I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't be adding him. I would just be paying attention to him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we were talking about like Boston Scott was like the more electric player coming out of the backfield, and like would that be intriguing even if Miles Sanders is healthy? So like I think there's some draw to that second running back spot.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit, and then that's one of those situations again too where if Sanders is to get banged up, that's going to be a guy everybody's going to want to add.
Yeah.
We're not talking about quarterbacks because we don't do that shit around here.
There's nobody that's going to be like a fantasy move scenario, which is kind of what today's theme, is looking at, is like waiver pickups and stuff. But when we were talking about receivers and rookie
Mhm.
receivers impact, I thought it was pretty interesting that guys that we thought were going to be sitting on the bench for a while actually got some looks. Like Fields and Lance had red zone packages that they were put in the field for, and Jordan Love came into the
Mhm.
game with 10.5 minutes left. So like seems like that might those guys might be coming up a little faster than we were expecting, or they're at least getting a taste, maybe for a comfort level thing. I don't know, but not
The
changing
Lan- the
much for
Lance,
fantasy. But like these guys are
yeah,
coming.
the Trey Lance thing was not as surprising for me, just because they were kind of doing that throughout preseason, where they were like
Yeah,
switching between them in games, and then there's been a lot of talk about how they might have packages for him, almost kind of like a Taysom Hill type thing, like the Saints do. Fields was surprising to me to see him come out there and run a few plays, especially in the red zone. Like the first time that the Bears got in the red zone, Fields came out and they
yeah.
had him throw. That was like super weird. I didn't get that. As a Bears fan, I'm all for it. Let's get Fields out there and let him get some work. I mean, even if it's not pretty, like let's go out there and get him some work, because what we do know is Andy Dalton's not going to go out there and win you games. He's just such a I don't even want to get into it with the Andy Dalton thing, but I just think that Justin Fields, his time's coming, and it, like to your point, it may be sooner rather than later. I think when that dude hits the field, like for fantasy purposes anyway, think you're going to want him on your team if you're one of those teams that has a fringe quarterback. Like maybe you got a Ryan Tannehill and you're not feeling too great about that performance. He did get another rushing touchdown. We were talking about that last week too. How he had like 7 rushing touchdowns.
7 touchdowns rushing last year.
He did get one in. He did get one in again. But if you've got a guy like that you're watching that performance and you're feeling a little iffy about it, and you don't have a second quarterback, and maybe you got some people on your bench you don't really care about. If you can't get any of these other waiver guys that we mentioned, that we talked about, like if Fields is out there, I mean, Fields is also owned in about half of leagues. But, you know, it's the cheat code with these running quarterbacks. And he is absolutely going to run the ball, and he's very, very fast. You know, all that guy has to do is take 150-yarder to the house, and he's made your fantasy day, regardless of what he does in the passing game.
Yeah, well, and this is where we have to say, in standard fantasy football platform that you're probably most familiar with, rookie quarterbacks love throwing to their tight end, so if Justin Fields ends up being the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, Cole Kmet I could see being a tight end 1. Probably going to be
tight end 1 the rest of the year.
Tight end 1 rest of the year. Over the last 4 games that Justin Fields played at Ohio State, he was slanging it to his tight ends.
Over the last 4 weeks. Okay, Barry.
No, I mean, I'm being facetious, but Cole Kmet has looked like a better player. I watched most of that game, and he was doing little things right. He was having a bigger impact away from the ball, and I think it's time to start paying a little more attention to Cole Kmet. I know you mentioned him for the tight end thing, but I am liking what I'm seeing from him, and I do think that Justin Fields could be a big boost for him too.
He could end up being a boost for everybody. I mean, really, we don't know. You know, I feel like they're capped with Andy Dalton right now. And we just don't know what we're going to get out of Fields. But knock on wood. Knock on wood. I don't want to say this out loud, but I sure wouldn't think it would get much worse.
I'm thinking, like, if I'm an Allen Robinson owner and, like, Dalton goes back to old Dalton ways, like, he could be getting, like, 13 targets a game. I don't know. Like, he fed A.J. Green, but obviously that's not what Bears fans want to see. It's not best for the team. Nope. Fields is coming.
Yes. Please, next week, please. Get your head out of your ass, Nagy.
I mean, I think that's about it for like waiver ads, though, right? Like that's fantasy relevant stuff. Yep. There's some other stuff that might be. I guess we can just kind of shoot the breeze to throw a little bit more onto the stream. It looks like we do have some people hanging out, so not a bad idea. I thought it was encouraging or exciting to see that Kyle Pitts had 8 targets. I also found it interesting that Hayden Hurst had 4 catches himself. So it seems like he is spending more time outside.
Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me, but he ran a lot of routes like out wide or in the slot, which, you know, again, we talked about that last week too, how if Pitts is used in that way, and we kind of thought he would be, then that is obviously much more intriguing for fantasy, even if the production is not there immediately. Like you have to like the usage and what you're seeing from that standpoint. It was a little inefficient. 4 catches on those 8 targets. Yep. One of them hit him in the helmet. You know, I mean, take the good with the bad. But at the end of the day, like I expect, you know, you would expect those things to get fixed. And all you can really ask for right now is where they're putting him and the type of routes they're having him. He's clearly part of the plan, the game plan, a big part of it. And that's really all you can ask right now. Like the fantasy production should come. You know, it might take a few weeks, or it could be as soon as next week, but it's coming.
Yeah, for sure. There was another backtrack, I guess, a little bit, but one of our late round receiver sleepers that I had wrote down was Tyra Williams. He's a number 1 receiver. That's not true. So the Lions' number 1 receiver is T.J. Hockenson. I have not seen him featured like that yet. So it's 1 week. We'll see what happens going forward. But I didn't think Goff would be targeting the tight end the way he was. So like that part has been put to rest for me. I'm a little less worried about Goff at quarterback because like that I saw enough on week 1. He seemed to be the
Yeah.
focus for the receivers. But also like Swift, mostly Swift, but Swift and Williams, like they got some. You were talking about dump offs, like they got some looks too, and I know some of that was more game flow or game scripting. But anyway, Tyra Williams didn't really do much, and then he also ended up with a head injury, a concussion. So pretty
Right.
far out on that one. People weren't really interested in him anyway. So if you still think there's anything left for him to offer, you're gonna have a good chance of getting him on free agency anyway. So yeah, I'm out on Tyrell Williams as
You're
far
cutting
as
him.
yeah.
One week he's out.
He gone. He gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a guy like that too. His name is Mecole Hardman. You gone, bro. I mean, we were wondering how the situation was going to look with Kansas City. You know, obviously we knew it was Tyreek and it was Travis Kelce, and then we're just kind of wondering, is it going to be another guy now? You know, Sammy Watkins is not there. Is somebody actually going to be able to step up and be consistent? Of course, it's only 1 week, so we don't really know, and it might be jumping the gun a little bit. It probably is, but it probably isn't. You know, Robinson and Hardman, they basically split routes, and neither one of them were relevant, and kind of feel like that's going to be the case the entire season. I don't even care if one of them goes out and has a big game next week. Like, don't expect that to then follow up the next week because they're just going to disappoint you. Some of these waiver guys that we've mentioned, I'm totally willing to cut a Mecole Hardman or Robinson if I pick them up and pick up one of these other guys and just kind of see what happens with them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's gonna be. I think we do a pretty good job of making it clear, like, what our expectations are when we throw some of these names out there. Like, some of them are going to be guys that you're sitting on because you think that they're going to get better as the season goes on or their opportunity is going to improve. Some of them are all upside, and you're going to be looking at a guy, and we're going to say a name, and it's going to be like, okay, we want to see what this guy does, and you want to have him on your team while that's happening. So, I mean, like, for certain players or certain spots on your roster, like we're going to have very short attention spans. We're going to have very low loyalty, to those positions. And yeah, I mean, for 1 week, there's just some guys where you're like, I'm out.